First, let me show you how I color on a neutral light setting. No dramatic lighting and no complex colors. Grab your airbrush, we're gonna be using it a lot here. After laying the base color, I color pick the third color here and slowly dab the airbrush on the cheek parts. One tip I'd like to share that might be useful to beginners is using delicate, controlled motions. I'm using soft strokes, touching the surface as if I'm slowly tickling it with a feather. Otherwise, the blush might be too strong and we don't want that. Then move the layer above everything else so it looks more transparent. After I'm done with the blush, I make a new layer, grab my airbrush and start coloring the lower eyelid. Again, light and slow strokes are key here. Next, I do the same thing with the upper eyelid. Also, adding some slight pink on the lips and the shoulders. I know shoulders don't blush, but hey, I like it and it looks cute, so why not? Then I create a new layer above the base color. With the lasso tool, I circle around the neck and collarbones. I choose a mid-tone color, then use the same delicate strokes from earlier with the airbrush. I make a new layer on top of the mid-tones and pick a darker shade for my main shadows. With a hard round brush, I start drawing the hair's shadow on the face. Not too detailed, not too simple. Just want to show that the hair has some weight to it and it's not glued to the face. Now, you probably noticed I didn't draw the nose. Like at all. Just a dot. I prefer not to draw detailed noses most of the time, though it depends on the character. I just make a small triangle depending on the light source. After the face's main shadows, I make a new layer and start working on the neck portion. I trace the chin's shape with the lasso tool and fill it with a darker shade. Then I add details to the neck with the airbrush. Lock the main shadow layer and color pick the lighter skin tone. With the airbrush, add some gradient to the shadows. We're almost done here, but we need to add some other tones to the skin so the shading isn't too boring. So, I choose a light grayish purple to add some undertones to the shading. Adding a cooler tone balances out the warm face tones. By adding it to the neck portion, it brings more attention to the center of the face. Now that we are done with the shadow placements, we can work on refining the shapes. First, I smoothen the shadows around the face area. Generally, I go for an effect like this. We have a base color, a shadow, a reflective light, then a warm edge on top of the shadow. But don't smoothen everything like this. We need hard edges too. To make some subtle hard edges, just make your airbrush really small so it looks like a hard edge. I like to make the edges a warm tone and the reflective color a cool tone, like here for example. By the way, all of this depends on the color of the light, so be careful. After refining the shadows a bit, I add some pink to the lower eyelids. I showed this process in my eye tutorial video, but basically I try to make the colors as bright and harmonious as possible. Same thing with the lips. Since I want this character to have a young and natural look, I don't give her full lipstick lips, but more like an oily lip balm look. Also, here's a cool trick most artists like to do. First, choose a grayish red color, make a new multiply layer and cover the whole face except for the side. Then lock the layer and color the inside with a warmer shade of red. Play around with the opacity of the layer until you find something you like. Then erase the nose portion, something like this. After locking the layer, pick a warm shade of pink and color the edges using the airbrush. Then erase the edges as if there are hair strands casting shadows. Lastly, don't forget that our character is basically chilling in a blank space, so naturally, white light reflects on their skin. Remember to refine the shadows with the airbrush and eraser here and there. Just in case you think your colors look dull, try making a new overlay layer and softly coloring the edges under the eyelids or cheeks using warm colors. So, we got the technique down, but how do we color and render darker skin tones? How do we decide where to place the shadows? Let me show you. Using a reference is a must for learning where to place our shadows, but where do we find reliable references? Pinterest would be a good start for references. I'm actually using a reference from there as we speak. But for more complex compositions, you will need more specific references. For that, using 3D models is very useful. Clip Studio 3D models are a great start, but there's also a program called DAZ 3D, which is free to use. DAZ 3D is basically a 3D software, but there are human models that you can customize. Basically, you drag and drop a pre-made model, then you can pose it and customize the body shape using the sliders. There are also lighting options such as spotlight, sunlight, etc. Drag and drop whatever you like and then position it, resize it, and my favorite, change the light color. I personally have no idea how to use 3D programs, but with That's 3D, you only need to move sliders or arrows, so it's not that difficult to use. Using my reference picture, I add a multiply layer, drop the opacity, and then erase parts touched by light. All of that being said, there's an important detail that we need to keep in mind. Skin tones react differently to light. Light skin tones reflect, dark skin tones absorb. What this means is that there's more hue value in the darker skin tones because it absorbs the color rather than reflecting it. Warning, there's one mistake that most people tend to make when it comes to darker skin tones, and that's thinking that you can only use reds and oranges as a base. But did you know that you can also use purples and magentas as well? Since purple and magenta are cooler colors, we can combine them with warm reds to get beautiful tone shifts. Coloring skin depends on the actual skin tone of the character and the light source. Try to visualize how the light source reflects on the character's skin and how that influences the shifts in its tone. And last but not least, don't forget to be delicate and controlled with your strokes. There's a certain amount of pressure you want to apply when using the airbrush. Try to experiment and see what amounts of pressure equate to soft and hard edges respectively. What tutorial do you want to see next? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.